Hello, I am TOROS. Welcome to what's happening in Turkey. Motorless jet, Erdoğan's crisis of legitimacy and the collapsing paradigm. A White House visit first presented as a triumph. How did it end up looking more like a defeat? Once Erdoğan's search for legitimacy in Washington was exposed, what kind of political stage play unfolded back in Ankara? And how did the public respond? Plus, how Erdoğan's own foreign minister undermined Turkey's much trumpeted national and domestic fighter jet project, long celebrated by the presidential palace as a symbol of pride. This was the week when the entire paradigm began to collapse. Let's break it down step by step. The theater of legitimacy at Parliament. President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan returned from his US trip claiming victory. Pro-government media echoed this line, circulating carefully curated White House images and insisting he had been treated like a global statesman shaping Donald Trump's views on the Middle East. But the reality was starkly different. Erdoğan failed to secure any meaningful agreements. Instead, he came home with commitments to purchase $43 billion worth of liquefied natural gas and 225 Boeing passenger jets, a deal viewed by critics as an expensive photo opportunity. The real sting came from remarks by Washington's ambassador to Ankara, Tom Barrack, who declared one day before the meeting, "Trump will give Erdoğan what he wants, legitimacy." Offended but silent, Erdoğan said nothing when he later saw Barrack face to face at the White House. The second blow at home. The main opposition Republican People's Party, CHP, currently leading in polls, announced it would boycott the opening of Parliament on 1st of October because Erdoğan himself was delivering the keynote speech. A party spokesperson declared, "We no longer recognize Erdoğan as legitimate." In response, Erdoğan staged a counter-move. On the very same day, after addressing Parliament, he orchestrated meetings with every opposition leader, except CHP, and posed for photos at a reception, symbolically seated on a taller, gilded chair at the center. The intended message: Erdoğan was legitimate, with even the opposition by his side. But this backfired. Opposition voters were outraged and vented anger at their own leaders for appearing complicit. One by one, those leaders felt compelled to issue public explanations. Erdoğan's bid to showcase legitimacy at home, after failing to secure it abroad, turned into yet another political setback. A motorless jet on goal. Turkey's fighter jet troubles go back years. Its F-16 fleet has not been upgraded in more than a decade. Ankara was expelled from the US-led F-35 program in 2019 after purchasing Russian S-400 missile systems, triggering American CAATSA sanctions. A return to the F-35 is nearly impossible, especially with strong opposition from regional powers like Israel. Last year, Ankara reached a deal with Washington for new F-16s and upgrades, but progress has stalled. In the meantime, Erdoğan showcased Turkey's national and domestic jet project, the KAAN. After its first test flight in 2024, Turkey even announced a deal to sell 48 jets to Indonesia. Yet, none were ready for delivery. Then came the bombshell. Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, speaking in New York just after Erdoğan's return, admitted the KAAN jet's engines were blocked by US sanctions. This undercut Erdoğan's core narrative. The flagship fighter was not truly homegrown. Turkey remained dependent on US technology for its most critical component. Erdoğan dodged questions. Fidan stood by his words. Analysts are now debating, was this an unforced error that could derail Fidan's future just as his name was floated as a successor to Erdoğan, or a calculated signal, leveraging his ties to Washington and London to shift the balance of power? Arrest warrant for a dollar billionaire. Another shock of the week, an arrest warrant for Turgay Ciner, one of Turkey's few dollar billionaires. Ciner had gradually shifted his wealth to the UK and US while offloading his remaining Turkish assets. He sold his media group to Can Holding late last year. At the time, the sale was approved. Months later, however, authorities branded the deal suspicious. Investigations followed. Trustees were appointed to 121 Can Holding companies, its owners arrested, and on 29th of September, an arrest warrant issued for Ciner himself. His son and senior executives were detained, and trustees installed across their businesses. This is not an isolated case. More than 1,050 companies in Turkey are now run by government-appointed trustees under the State Saving Deposits Insurance Fund, TMSF. Once a regulator, the TMSF has become a sprawling state-controlled conglomerate overseeing billions in assets, from energy and automotive firms to media groups and even sports clubs. The legitimacy crisis deepens. Erdoğan is battling a dual crisis of legitimacy, abroad and at home. Internationally, Washington and its allies remain distrustful. Domestically, the opposition is pushing back while citizens face worsening economic strain, political repression, and an economy increasingly monopolized by state-appointed trustees. Meanwhile, speculation is mounting that the opposition CHP itself could face trusteeship or even outright closure, a step that would trigger political shockwaves. All signs suggest October will be one of the most volatile months yet. I'm TARIK TOROS. You've been watching What's Happening in Turkey. See you next week.